All right, guys. So I'd planned on doing this before. I've had a lot less time than I wish that I had lately. So this is a little bit rushed. Um, some of this information is literally just things that I dug up, and I'll say just like I did in the previous live stream, I'm not here to prove to people that I'm a genius. I'm here to persuade that my position is more than likely the correct one. That's my only goal. So let me dig into this real quick. So this is kind of in order of how things were brought up, unless something reminded me of something that was said later that links to it. There's a method to the madness, but it may seem sort of jumbled just because I'm not covering every single little detail. I don't want this to be like an hour long. Yeah, and I'm sure there's going to be some claims that were made that I did not cover here. Again, I haven't had the time that I wanted. This is like literally the night before the next live stream, and I should have already been asleep. There's on the off chance that Otangelo shows up again, I want to have something available. He may not even watch this, but still, it's better than nothing, and at least it gives me some prep to some extent, and at least attempting to tackle the claims that he made. And again, he did a better job than I'm used to. He brought up some valid points and some things that I just couldn't touch because I don't have the prerequisite knowledge to be able to. And I have no problem admitting that. So I was able to learn something myself in this process. Anyhow, let's go ahead and get into this. So originally there was my claim that he was starting with a presupposition, and Otangelo made the claim that there was no such thing. There was no presupposition involved. A presupposition is a thing tacitly assumed beforehand at the beginning of a line of argument or course of action. So admittedly, I'm making an assumption myself that this is the case, but the evidence supports my view. I explained on stream and also later on, I believe more evidence comes to light by the use of the watchmaker fallacy. The watchmaker fallacy refers to the common critique that the watchmaker analogy, which argues that the complexity of the universe implies a designer, a watchmaker, is illogical because it contains flawed reasoning. Critics point to the fallacy of false analogy, arguing that a manufactured object like a watch is not comparable to a natural entity like the universe, which has different properties and origins. The argument also faces issues like circular reasoning and non sequitur, claiming the universe is a perfect example of design while also assuming this design points to a creator. The most likely source of this belief, given the lack of logic provided to arrive at this belief, is, in my view, is the presupposition that complexity must have a creator. This presupposition, especially if completely alone, is incredibly fallacious. There was a claim that the second law of thermodynamics would be violated by the Big Crunch model. This is the biggest issue that I had that I did not have the prerequisite knowledge to be able to address, and I admitted so. I've done, well, I'm pulling up information here, and this is the results of my research. The Big Crunch does not inherently violate the laws of thermodynamics, although it presents a challenge to the second law by suggesting a highly ordered state following a phase of increasing disorder. Some cosmological models propose that the universe could enter a new cycle by reversing the order of events, effectively reducing entropy to create a new Big Bang from the collapsed Big Crunch. A challenge doesn't make the two mutually exclusive or impossible to work together. When we find challenges like this, we use science to determine precisely what the problem is, whether it makes an old model obsolete, etc. In this case, it doesn't. Plus, even if it didn't fit, it wouldn't make the concept of a supernatural creator deity any more likely. For the sake of argument, even if you had completely demolished the Big Crunch theory, which you haven't, it still wouldn't be points in favor of intelligent design. Again, that concept would provide far more problems than solutions. Also, on a side note, I was able to dig through a little bit of Odd's video, which you probably haven't seen. Um, uh, Mr. Grasso, but I don't know for sure. I wasn't able to see the whole thing due to lack of time, but he, on this topic, he said that gravity could solve this problem entirely, unless I misunderstood what he was trying to say. Instructional information requiring a designer claim. This was another big point, and I said that we already have information that counters this, and we do. But so here we go. This claim that instructional information requires a designer is a form of the teleological argument for God. The core of the atheist counterargument rests on the theory of evolution by natural selection, which demonstrates how complex, quote, specified biological information can arise through a non-directed mechanistic process. And by the way, a lot of people get lost in this. You go the theory of evolution and they go, oh, it's just a theory. Like, no, we don't even know that it exists. So evolution is broken down into two pieces, at least in the specific way that I mean now. I don't have this scripted. I just didn't include this, but off the top of my head, that evolution exists is an absolute fact beyond any shadow of a doubt. Absolute. It's a theory in that we don't understand precisely the manner in which it works, and we're working on it, and we've come a long way. But you cannot claim that evolution does not exist and be taken seriously. Like, I'm sorry, like there are mountains of fucking evidence that you're just brushing to the wayside if you're making that claim anyway, just because it's inconvenient for you. So, mutation and selection. Genetic mutations are random changes to an organism's DNA, but natural selection, the process by which organisms better adapted to their environment tend to survive and reproduce more successfully, is not. It is this non-random preservation of favorable traits over many generations that directs the accumulation of complex biological information. And this is essentially the claim that I made. Of course, I didn't do a great job of doing it, but that was essentially it. The way I worded it is that you're working in reverse. But anyhow, let's continue. Gradual accumulation. Evolution does not require a single sudden creative act. Instead, it operates on a series of small incremental changes that over vast periods of time can produce highly complex and functional biological systems. The designer argument is an argument from ignorance. Atheists contend that the instructional information requires a designer argument is a modern variation of the God of the gaps fallacy. This is another claim that I've made. Fallacy of divine intervention. The argument asserts that because we do not yet fully understand how a complex biological system or process evolved, it must have been designed by a supernatural agent. This is not a scientific explanation, but an appeal to ignorance. This is another claim that I made myself, of course, in a different way. And not just myself, other people made this claim as well. Fallacy of divine intervention. The argument asserts that because we do not yet Sorry, I just read that. Specified complexity is unscientific. Intelligent design proponents have never provided a testable scientific method for distinguishing specified complexity caused by a designer from complexity arising from natural processes. It is an assertion, not a scientific theory, and it lacks a falsifiable mechanism. Lacking falsifiability tends to be a hallmark for theist arguments, in my experience. And it either they're blind to that or they know it and they purposefully continue on because they want, like, a quote, an emotional win. They want to appear to have a victory when logically they do not. I keep going off script. The who designed the designer problem. We also brought this up. The argument for an intelligent designer is internally inconsistent and leads to an infinite regress, according to atheists. Exception without justification. Theists claim that complex information requires a designer, but they exempt their own deity from this rule. They posit a designer, a being of immense or even infinite complexity, who is exempt from the very principle they use to argue for his existence. This is the exact point that I made using the contingency argument. You don't use science. So what you do is you go, there's this magical thing that exists. Excuse me. That has no way, there's no way to falsify, and we can't measure it in any way. But it just by sheer virtue of me claiming that it's the case is exempt from causality. Like, it doesn't need something to have created it. You can't demonstrate this. Yet in the same breath, you use the contingency argument as ammunition against atheists. You have the same problem. Like, I don't understand why this is like difficult for some people. Like, you don't escape the issue because you can't demonstrate in any logical way why your creator is exempt from causality. And I don't think you can. Arbitrary end to the chain of causality. If complex things must have a designer, then the most complex thing, the designer itself, must also have a designer. Postulating a designer does not resolve the question of origins. It only pushes the problem back one step. Atheists argue there is no logical reason to believe that the chain of causality for complexity ends arbitrarily at a supernatural agent. Essentially, that's what I just said. The universe is not a well-designed machine. Atheists also challenge the assumption that the universe exhibits this kind of flawless, efficient design that would be expected from an omnipotent and benevolent creator. Argument from poor design. Nature is full of inefficient, suboptimal designs, from the human eye's blind spot to the appendix, which suggests a non-deliberate, messy evolutionary history rather than intelligent planning. Just to add on to this. So when I get this perfection or like argument, and that's not exactly what Grasso did. I'm not trying to like change or straw man him, but just in general, when I get these sort of arguments, you just assume perfection. You can't demonstrate it. Like, you just say like, it almost seems like it's emotional in nature. Like, you like the content, like you want to use it because it fits so well with your narrative. And I believe that you identify with your belief to such an extent that you will protect it at all costs, which to me explains why you use fallacious reasoning to try to, I don't know, use mental gymnastics here. Anyway, the universe is not fine-tuned for life. The so-called fine-tuning of the universe is an example of the survivorship fallacy. I've never heard of that before. The universe is not designed for life, but rather life has adapted to the particular and often hostile conditions of our universe. We can only observe a universe that allows for our existence, so it appears fine-tuned from our limited perspective. That's essentially what I just said. Well, part of what I just said. And also I've never heard of the survivorship fallacy. It's interesting, and I need to look it up. This is another point that I made during the live stream, essentially, that it's going back to what I said earlier about you're working in reverse type deal. Anyhow, that is it for now. I've got to get some sleep. Again, I'm sure there's things that I missed, and feel free to challenge me on anything that I didn't touch that you claimed. because I can assure you, I've not left anything out purposefully because I think that there's no way I can touch it logically, etc. Um, I think those were the most important things that I personally considered uh, contentious points that have some validity, that, or at least perceived validity, that I might need to cover. Anyhow, anyway, it's like 15 minutes in anyhow. So again, feel free to bring up anything that you think is very important that I didn't touch upon, and I'll do so later. Thank you for your time.